Hello, you're listening to From McClay to Zalma. I'm your host, Karen Miller. This podcast is about the adventures and travels of two women from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, who work for the U.S. Army at Zama, Japan. Their stories are told through hundreds of letters written home. Episode 2. Well, in episode 1, it was their first day on the train on their way from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania to Seattle. And episode 2 covers letters 2 and 3 when they arrive in Seattle and then get to spend more time than I would have expected waiting to move forward with their trip. So I'm going to read the 2 letters first. The first one is from Peg, June 25th, 1953. From the New Richmond Hotel. Dear folks, well, here we are in Seattle. We arrived at 7:30 this morning and came over here to the hotel first thing. We reported to the Fort Lawton representative, but she doesn't want to see us until tomorrow morning, so we have the rest of today free. I don't know what we'll do. Bern and I went out to look for a restaurant this morning and found one that wasn't too nice. We had walked about 6 blocks from the hotel and still hadn't found a shopping district, so I guess that's what we'll look for this afternoon. And, of course, we'll look for a movie. But we didn't even see any theaters yet. Seattle must be a mighty big city. All we've seen of it so far is hilly, which goes over like a lead balloon with us. However, we also hope to get a chance to take a sightseeing tour, and maybe we'll find some flat places. We have a big double room at the New Richmond. We're going to let Catherine Schuer, that was she that we saw at the station, bunk with us. Anyhow, we both said that we'd hate to be all alone when there were more people going to the same place, and so far she's okay. I guess you worried like the dickens, unless you changed drastically in the last few days, when I said we were both a little sick on the train. The next day we both feel fine, and we still do, although we were both glad to walk steady again. Our beds on the train were very comfortable, and we slept very well both nights. Yesterday we passed through Montana, and it was gorgeous. We passed by one of the 4 big hotels in Glacier National Park, and it was just beautiful. Golly, the Rockies are wonderful, but the towns through which we passed are typical Western mountain towns. Low, flat, not many buildings, and so far I'll still take Harrisburg. After leaving Everett, Washington this morning, we came to Seattle along the shore of the Puget Sound. I guess it was Puget Sound. At least it was much, much water. All along the way, we saw all kinds of boats and ships and piers. I could just imagine little Marky seeing those sights. He would have had a stranglehold around my neck and been so excited. Love his little heart. I hope you wrote to us in care of this hotel to tell us the latest news, but if not, we'll just have to wait. I don't know how long we'll be here, but Bern will write to you after we get more information tomorrow. Catherine just came back from downstairs, and she found some booklets on tours, so I imagine we'll take one. Well, I guess that brings you up to date for now. Take care of yourselves and make Blondie behave. Is her hair growing in yet? Isn't she cute? Tell everyone we said hello. Love and kisses, Peg. Letter number 3 from Bern, June 26, 1953. Hi, folks. Did you get Peg's letter mailed from Whitefish, Montana? That was a lovely little station with beautiful garden and flowers. The trip was uneventful, but the Empire Builder was quite a train. Peg has probably already told you about the trip, so I'll start with Seattle. The city appears to be rather crude and raw. It has big, imposing buildings, and the shopping section stretches for miles in long, straight streets. Peg and I spent most of yesterday afternoon in one huge store, Frederick and Nelson's. It quite measures up to the best of the New York stores, and the women we saw in it as clerks and customers were dressed fabulously fashionable. No kidding, both Peg and I felt farmerish in comparison. We don't know yet when we will leave, although we were out at the port today and had more processing done. There were about 40 folks in the group we were with, and some very interesting-looking girls and guys among them. Dad, will be glad to hear that we finally broke down and became acquainted with Catherine Schuer. In fact, we are sharing a room with her. She's okay, I guess. We will have quite a bit of free time here, as we are planning to take a tour of the city and possibly out of town too. We'll let you know later all about it. Thanks for your letter. What about the picture? Didn't it appear yet? Let us know. Lots of love. Burn. Well, let's start with this poor person, Catherine. One wonders about her, since she was described by two different people as okay. Not a glowing recommendation in my book. I initially wondered if Peg perhaps invited Catherine to stay with them without consulting her sister, or vice versa. But maybe not. Maybe they were both very kind people who probably were just trying to help somebody out. I also wonder if Catherine was the daughter of one of their father's friends. It kind of sounded like that to me. So I started to research some things, one of which was photos from the Great Northern Railway and the Empire Builder, and they were fabulous. So those are linked in the show notes. And a 1953 ad for the Great Northern Railway, which was impressive. I also noted that the railroad in 1953 had observation cars, like two-story ones where you could go up in the top and sit, and big windows everywhere. And they didn't mention that, but it made me wonder if they had gotten to experience that. I'm sure that seeing Montana from that view would have been incredible. So now we are in Seattle, and they're at the New Richmond Hotel, which sounds like it was quite a place. I put a link to a historical article about the New Richmond Hotel, but let's just say that it sounds wild. When it was first built in the early 1900s, the owner shot at his father-in-law in the hotel. Didn't hit him. But I think that was the start of some wild goings-on. But it was right across from the railroad station, so that's super convenient. There's a mention of how big Seattle must have been. It was more than 4.5 times bigger than Harrisburg, population-wise, in the 1950s. So, and I don't think it's a great city for walking, just my experience. So then I started to think about this book I read called 100 Drives, 5,000 Ideas. I bought it during the pandemic because I was really feeling cabin fever. And it's this gorgeous National Geographic book by photographer Joe Yogerst. And one of the, so I looked it up so I could see, there is a drive mentioned that's going around the Puget Sound. It says Puget Sound Island Hopping. And it starts out in Seattle and just looks gorgeous. So it says there's an awesome network of roads, bridges, and Washington State ferries that enable this island hopping adventure between Seattle and the San Juan Islands. A road trip that features old-growth forests, secluded beaches, and incredible wildlife. So I recommend both the book and the drive. I intend to take that drive. The next one is the Rocky Mountain Highway in Montana and Wyoming, and it includes Glacier National Park, Yellowstone, and Grand Teton, and that is also a drive I plan to take. I think that it would be amazing, and the pictures in this book are great, so you should check this book out. I put a link to it in my show notes. And it's time for a little clarification of things and people mentioned. Marky was their nephew that lived with them at some point. I don't know. He lived with them when he was 2 or 3, I believe. But his parents lived there as well. There were always people moving in and out of the house that they grew up in on McClay Street. And my mother told great stories about that house, especially during the farm show when they would open the doors and have boarders And there was a big giant stack of mattresses that were kept in a back hallway for when the boarders came for the farm show. Pennsylvania State Farm Show is a big event. There weren't enough hotel rooms in the town, so people opened their homes. And my mother told stories about jumping on those mattresses as a small child. It sounds like it was a fun place to be. Always a lot of people coming and going. The reference to Blondie was a Cocker Spaniel that had belonged to a relative who lived nearby. And when she passed away, the dog just walked down the street to their house and moved itself right in. Well, Bert and Peg and their brothers and sisters had never been allowed to have any pets, but exceptions were made for Blondie, who became their father's companion in his later years. My mother would tell stories of Blondie being terrified of storms and finding her way into the coat closet in the hallway and burying herself underneath the coats until the storm passed. So that's what I know about Blondie. Here's some information that I found out about Frederick and Nelson's department store. It was for many years Seattle's premier department store. The store was founded by Donald E. Frederick, who was born in 1860 and died in 1937, and Nels B. Nelson, 1854 to 1907. In 1890, the two men began selling used furniture during the rebuilding of Seattle after the Great Fire of 1889. The business expanded to include home delivery of goods, a tea room, and ready-to-wear men's and women's fashions. The owners built a reputation for elegance and customer service. In 1916, Donald Frederick astonished the Seattle business community by planning his 6-story store at Fifth Avenue and Pine Street, then outside the city's retail core. It was called Frederick's Folly, but it proved to be an instant success when it opened the doors September 3rd, 1918. He told his staff, "Our new store is a monument to the idea of service. It has been made possible only because we have served. It is dedicated to better service, which we so earnestly desire to render the people of this community." The store featured unique amenities such as a candy factory, a children's hairdressing salon, a kindergarten, and a lounge for mothers with infants. The mail order department shipped distinctive merchandise around the world. Frederick's, as it was commonly referred to, won national awards for advertising, which was characterized by understatement. The use of the superlative in a word or expression was shunned. In 1929, Frederick sold his interest in the store to Marshall Field and Company of Chicago, but he retained ownership of the building. During World War II, the store embraced the war effort by becoming a center for the sales of war bonds and by opening a branch store at the Boeing Airplane Company's Plant No. 2. This allowed shift workers, many of whom were women, to shop. When the war ended, Frederick's helped feed the demand for consumer goods, and it established a reputation for the best in fashion. As America began moving to the suburbs, Frederick's opened its first major branch in the Bellevue Shopping Square in 1949. In 1951, the downtown store was expanded by 3 floors up and 2 floors down. Marshall Field executive William Street took over Frederick's in January 1938. He guided the store through its recovery from the Great Depression, the challenges of the World War II and post-war economic boom, and the store's expansion and changes during the 1950s. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I don't know about you, but it makes me want to go visit Seattle. I hope that you come back for episode 3. Have a great day.